I'll never forget the excitement of getting my first deluxe backpack. It was the biggest model and capable of hauling more Trapper Keepers, gym shorts, and bologna sandwiches than my prepubescent frame could handle. In Middle America, a kid took pride in wearing such a behemoth. And not just for what it could hold, but because of the name embroidered on the front, beside your own. I'm talking about LL Bean. For over a century, LL Bean has been making rugged, practical, no frills, outdoor focused clothes, as well as other things like backpacks, that both honor its heritage and embrace the present, all while respecting the hard-earned money of the customer buying it. And this principled approach is inspiring, and I still feel a sense of pride wearing it. LL Bean. Wearing some of it, that is. The ravenous consumption habits of the 21st century, combined with a rapidly evolving fashion industry, have put these principles to the test. And it shows in LL Bean's current offerings, unfortunately. So join me as we explore this storied brand and how to make the best of it on the pre-owned markets. eBay, Poshmark, Depop, Mercari, Facebook Marketplace. But first, we need a quick history lesson. Actually, first, quick introduction to my Substack. So I've spent years buying and selling pre-owned clothes online. Scrolling the different marketplaces, looking for those listings where perhaps the seller didn't know quite what they had. Or perhaps the seller just wanted to get rid of something really quick. Or perhaps the seller just took terrible photos and they didn't capture the beauty of a particular piece. Plus I run Coyote Sharp. So all of this has honed my eye to spotting good deals. And on my Substack, I put that to use where I curate different listings that offer at least solid value, aka good deals, or that I find interesting. Sometimes I'll introduce a brand or a particular design, and other times it'll be my hot off the press series, where I'll go and I'll scroll through the latest listings on eBay of a particular brand or design, find the good deals, package them up, and send them off to you all before they're gobbled up by other savvy shoppers. For $5 a month, you'll get 2 postings a week and my deep appreciation, because it'll allow me to keep making these videos. Now back to the history lesson. In the early 20th century, a man by the name of Leon Wood Bean loved nothing more than to snake his way through the dense, marshy woodlands of Maine in search of wild game. But his passion was hindered by a problem dreaded by all outdoor enthusiasts: wet feet. So in 1911, he set out to solve this issue, and with the help of a local cobbler, invented a piece of footwear consisting of a rubber bottom and a leather upper. And after a successful outing wearing his new invention, decided to have 100 more made in hopes of selling his newly christened Maine hunting shoe under the name LL Bean. Well, the shoe was not an immediate success due to structural failures, but Bean was persistent. After some improvements, the shoe proved a hit and set the groundwork for LL Bean's expansion into other outdoor clothing and accessories, such as the chamois cloth shirt and the Maine duck hunting coat, now called a field coat, and many others, all aimed at helping people fully enjoy the incredible wilderness activities his beloved Maine and ultimately the world had to offer. And at the heart of LL Bean's business philosophy was a deep belief in always doing right by the customer. Above all, we wish to avoid having a dissatisfied customer. We consider our customers a part of our organization, and we want them to feel free to make any criticism they see fit in regard to our merchandise or service. Sell practical, tested merchandise at a reasonable profit, treat your customers like human beings, and they will always come back. And with this philosophy being backed by an incredible lifetime guarantee, LL Bean earned really unprecedented brand loyalty. And combined with very little management turnover, LL Bean has only had 4 CEOs, including Leon Bean himself. The company enjoyed incredibly stable growth, eventually opening dozens of retail locations, including its flagship store in Freeport, Maine, famous for being open 24 hours a day, and just really cementing itself in popular culture as the practical, sturdy, hardy, tough, upper middle-ish class New Englander brand. But the times in reality did eventually catch up to LL Bean, with the 2000s bringing competition from less expensive competitors, coupled with consumer demand for lower prices, and other reasons, all leading to LL Bean adjusting quality standards. And in 2018, they rescinded its famous return policy, essentially stating that it was being abused, but a lot of its loyal customers didn't buy this, and it in a lot of ways just officially marked a departure from the LL Bean of the past, known for prioritizing quality, to a more accessible everyday brand, mostly concerned with keeping prices down. But the company is still very respected and shows no signs of trending downward, and with it currently operating 60 retail locations worldwide and doing about $1.6 billion in revenue, for context, Patagonia does about 1.7 and J. Crew does around 3. The pre-owned markets are going to continue to be fed for the upcoming years. So before diving into the pre-owned markets, let's first orient ourselves within the larger clothing ecosystem so we can just get an idea of where LL Bean lies, price and design-wise, amongst most of the other major brands that have or still do overlap within their territory. And out of all of them, I would say LL Bean is kind of right in the middle. Above and to the right, you have Patagonia, Arc'teryx, and the North Face, which are more technical, sporty, and outdoor focused, as well as trendy and generally have a higher price tag. And to the right, you have REI Co-op, which is similarly priced but more outdoor focused. And under and to the right, you have Columbia and Eddie Bauer, which are more outdoor focused but generally a bit less expensive, though Eddie Bauer does have some pricey stuff. And under and to the left, you have Lands' End, which is a bit less expensive and more casual. And above you have Filson, that blends heritage aesthetics and rugged outdoor focused clothing, similar to LL Bean, just at a higher price point. And right in the middle sits LL Bean, capable of outfitting you for all but the most extreme adventures, while also offering a preppy, traditional, heritage-inspired wardrobe. And price-wise, pretty much in the middle. All right, before jumping into this topic, I want to preface a few things. First, I'm not a pro at assessing clothing quality. I've handled and looked at a lot of different garments and researched extensively, so my opinions aren't worthless, but I don't assume they're without errors or oversimplifications. Second, when I say something is high quality, I'm generally referring to clothes that are intended to be worn for many years, if not decades, will either look better with age or age very gracefully, and show obvious signs of fine workmanship. But quality isn't just about durability and craftsmanship. It also includes comfort, design, and functionality, and how all these elements come together. Plus, quality can be subjective depending on intended use. So just keep that all in mind before writing something off as bad quality. So LL Bean has long had a reputation as a high quality, buy it for life brand. You couldn't survive with such a generous return policy if your stuff wasn't really well built. And older LL Bean, it lives up to that reputation. I mean, this stuff feels robust and sturdy, and it's just really visually pleasing with its dense fabrics and, fine workmanship. Love this stuff. So this sweater that I'm wearing is older or vintage LL Bean. It is at least 25 years old, and to me, it just screams quality. It is made with 100% wool, and it uses worsted spun yarn, I believe. If you don't know the difference, check out my video on sweater materials. And the fabric is light and has great elasticity and bounce, and it isn't itchy, and overall the sweater still has great structure to it. The ribbing is still nice and tight and bouncy. I do like to fold up this hem right here because when it's folded down, this creates a little bit of a muffin top. So you fold it up, tightens it up a little bit. And yeah, aesthetically, it just looks really sharp. It has this really densely spun yarn combined with the way it was knit. It just looks really nice. I don't know how else to put it. I feel like this is the type of garment that someone who didn't know hardly anything about clothing could look at it and be like, that's nice. I feel like the quality is just really obvious. So here's another example of some fine older or vintage LL Bean. This is a hickory stripe or railroad stripe shirt. I believe technically the fabric is seersucker, though it doesn't have that ribbed texture that seersucker usually does, but I still think it is seersucker. So I could be wrong. It's a beautiful shirt. Fabric feels great. Nice heft, stitching, nice and tight and clean. But you know what to me really screams quality about it?
And I know this has nothing to do with the actual functioning of the shirt, but I still think it symbolizes that someone put care and thought and attention to detail in it. And that's the label and the way the label was sewn on. Isn't this just a really pretty label? Isn't that thing just so aesthetically pleasing, and it's tight and neat? It's like, look at that thing. Beautiful. I love it. And look how it was sewn on, with care. I feel like that's indicative of a quality piece. Or check out these LL Bean slacks. I don't think there's anything that better demonstrates the difference between clothes made today and those made, 30 plus years ago than these right here. The fabric on these is so stiff and dense and tight and has such structure to it. Like, look at these. And it's not because these things are like heavily starched or something. It's just the fabric has like such integrity to it. Hope this translates through video. But you know what is kind of a head scratcher about them? Is they're made with 60% cotton and 40% polyester. Like, why did LL Bean add 40% polyester to these? Was it a cost-saving measure, or does the polyester add something to the fabric, something desirable to the fabric that you couldn't achieve by just using all cotton? Like, I'm not sure. Kind of wonder about that. But either way, yeah, old LL Bean.
But come, I'd say, the late 2000s, early 2010s, LL Bean quality started to really noticeably shift downward. And with the elimination of their lifetime guarantee in 2018, what had been evident to many customers was all but confirmed. But this shift isn't unique to LL Bean, and it reflects broader changes in the clothing industry that really affected pretty much all of the brands I've covered so far. So while some might say LL Bean sold out, I do think the answer is more complicated. Perhaps LL Bean is more under spotlight, given that their brand's identity was and still is to some degree built on dependability. So, I can see why they're taking more heat, perhaps than most other brands. But nonetheless, today's LL Bean offerings just do not feel or look the same as the stuff from their past.
So this is a new wool LL Bean sweater in a similar design to the one I'm wearing, and frankly, this thing does not hold a candle to this thing. Biggest thing that kind of stands out about it is its lack of structure and rigidity. Like, this fabric, blah. Like, it doesn't have that nice kind of snapback, that nice elasticity and bounce of a good sweater. So what that means is if you wear this thing for any amount of time doing any level of physical activity, it's just gonna become a stretched out sloppy mess. Like, this sweater, yeah, it has some drape to it that's kind of part of its design, but it still has a handsome look to it. Where this thing, like, it looks okay now, but wear it for a year. What's it gonna look like? Some other things. So this sweater, like, they have different knit patterns on different parts of it. So different knit pattern on the shoulder, different knit pattern on the wrist, different knit pattern here by the waist. Now, I'm not sure if they did that to add a kind of unique visual appeal, or there's a functional element at play, or just perhaps a mixture of both. I'm not quite sure. But either way, it is an extra step or steps in manufacturing, and it just shows that there was some real thought put into this thing's design. With this thing, it's just uniform. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just does show the difference between these two. Yeah, this sweater does obviously have ribbing in the neck, the wrists, and the waist, but the ribbing, whatever. And these cuffs will probably be flared out messes in a year. Where look at these cuffs. Look at the ribbing. Boop, boop. Nice and fresh. Nice and fresh. So, yeah. And you know what also kills me about this sweater is they call it a ragwool sweater. Ragwool sweaters are traditionally a utilitarian sweater made with a mixture of older, coarser sheep's wool and some recycled wool. That's what gives it its marbled look. And yeah, they're meant to just be worn really hard and not necessarily have the most refined appearance. Where this thing neither feels very rugged nor has a very refined appearance. Like, if you can't be both, pick one. That kills me. And it's also made with lamb's wool. Like, why did they put lamb's wool in this ragwool sweater? Like, I don't get it. Lamb's wool is usually more delicate than the wool from older sheep. Now, I'm sure that there's certain types that are more robust and it can be spun or woven or knit in a way that can make it pretty strong, but I don't get it. I don't get it. It is kind of soft, or soft-ish. Perhaps a viewer can elucidate to the rest of us what LL Bean's inspiration was behind this thing, because frankly, Like what? What? So here's another example of newer LL Bean not quite holding up to older LL Bean. Now I will say the difference between these two is not as stark as the difference between that newer sweater and the sweater I'm wearing, but there is still a difference. So these are both canvas shirts, very popular LL Bean offerings. This shirt is approximately 20 years old and this shirt is brand new. All right, some differences that pop out to me. Biggest thing is the stitching. This shirt, it just looks like the stitching is a lot more tight and dense. It looks like they just really wanted to fuse those seams together. Where the stitching with this shirt just looks a little more loose and sloppy. Another thing, fabric. Now I will say, I'm not an expert at fabrics. I have somewhat of an untrained eye, but to me, it just seems like this shirt has a higher weave density than this shirt. Like if you look closely at it, it looks like this fabric is more porous. Where this fabric, it looks like they just really wanted to cinch those individual fibers together. Now, I really don't have a problem with this canvas shirt right here. 99% of people are never gonna wear this thing out. Like they don't need that really high density stitching or the high density weave perhaps. So I don't really have a problem with it. Like I would wear this thing, like no problem, 65 bucks, not bad, you know. So, but yeah, still, there's a bit of a difference.
But here's the thing. Is it fair to compare the LL Bean of 30 years ago to that of the stuff made today? Because adjusting for inflation, their current offerings are much less expensive. And the same goes for many other clothing brands. All right, this isn't entirely true and I foolishly just assumed without actually checking, because when I pulled some prices from old catalogs and ran them through a consumer price index calculator, I found the prices weren't that different than those of today, which is a little sad when you consider the quality difference. Now, this still might be an oversimplification and perhaps doesn't account for factors like shifting consumer preferences, tariffs, environmental regulations, or a whole host of other variables, but regardless, it's something worth considering. So perhaps it's more helpful to get an idea of where LL Bean quality stands today, relatively speaking. I mean, most of the stuff on the pre-owned markets was made within the last 10 to 15 years, and the pre-owned markets are going to be fed primarily by their newer offerings. So I feel like is useful information. And to get this rough idea, I decided to run a very unscientific comparison to one of its more expensive, highly respected competitors, Patagonia. And by unscientific, I mean I just went to both stores back to back and spent a considerable time in each, handling many different garments just to see if I could tell the difference between the two. And I could tell the difference. Patagonia overall felt more refined, and some, not all, just some of their more technical pieces really seemed to be next level. Like incredibly light, yet seemingly sturdy, and apparently are, given Patagonia's ironclad guarantee, whereas LL Bean stuff felt a bit more utilitarian. Now, when it came to casual wear, the gap didn't seem as noticeable. Yeah, perhaps the workmanship of LL Bean wasn't quite as nice as Patagonia's on some stuff, but it wasn't like comparing a high-end heritage brand to J. Crew, where the difference is pretty stark. Now, I think it's worth noting that there are always exceptions. Companies sometimes nail the execution of one piece and kind of flop on another. And if I was given a blind test between both brands and asked to rank quality-wise, I probably wouldn't score 100%. Though I will jump in here quick and say that this shirt and these boots felt particularly, So let's sum all this quality talk up. If you really appreciate clothes with heft and dense fabrics and fine workmanship, aim for older LL Bean. But if you're just looking for solid, affordable, practical, lightweight outdoor clothing and or casual clothing that is a solid step above fast fashion, LL Bean's current offerings should suit you just fine. So with age being a determining factor in quality, it kind of goes without having to be said that it's useful to be able to get a general idea of when something was made. And the two most straightforward, beginner-friendly ways to estimate age are label design and manufacturing origin. First, label design. So 99% of the labels you come across are going to be some variation of this design. It has been around since the late 1970s, I believe, and is still used today. Now, the differences between these tags are subtle, so I've roughly aligned them in order of age so you can get a general idea of how they've evolved. This probably isn't 100% accurate, but it is in the ballpark. Now, from the 1950s to the 1970s, I believe the label used the founder's signature, but there are some more recent LL Bean listings using this design as well. And prior to the 1950s, it is my understanding that the label used this general design, though the chances of you running into pieces from this era are pretty rare, and if you do, they're likely very expensive. Second way, manufacturing location. So for most of its history, LL Bean manufactured all their clothes in the US, or imported from countries that have a long history of producing that specific design, like Norway or Ireland. But my guess is this mostly stopped in the mid-2000s, with a few exceptions. So if you find something made in the US or Europe, it's likely at least 20 years old and of higher quality. Now, LL Bean's shift to foreign manufacturing didn't completely coincide with them ceasing domestic manufacturing, and I believe starting as early as the 1980s, clothes were made in Hong Kong, Korea, Malaysia, Canada, Turkey, and Thailand, and probably a couple others. So just because something was made in Asia doesn't automatically mean it's newer and thus poor quality. There were some really high quality garments made in these countries. But it seems production did shift away or altogether cease from these places by the early 2000s, so if you see something from them, good chance it's at least 20 years old, though there are exceptions like this new shirt, which was made in Thailand. And slowly through the late 2000s, early 2010s, production seemed to concentrate in China, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, Jordan, El Salvador, and probably a couple others, and this is when many noted a significant drop in quality. Now please note, this is just my 3/4 baked narrative. I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but it should give you a rough idea, or at least prime you to the clues and details that go into estimating age. So as you're cruising the pre-owned markets, these are the distinctly LL Bean, both new and vintage, designs that you're likely to encounter. First, the chamois cloth shirt. One of Bean's earliest offerings, the chamois shirt uses thick, dense, yet soft cotton fabric that makes for a hard-wearing casual staple. And if I had to recommend one thing and one thing only to buy pre-owned from LL Bean, it might be the chamois shirt. They're prolific, affordable, and estimating size is easy and forgiving. And though the newer ones might not hold up quality-wise to the vintage ones, they definitely won't fall apart and should work for most. But there are plenty of vintage ones out there if that's what you prefer. And the same thing goes for their canvas shirts. Fabric is just a little different. Next, the field coat. Originally called the Maine duck hunting coat, the field coat, or sometimes called a barn or chore coat, has been around since 1924 and is made with rugged cotton duck canvas that was originally intended to withstand the bushwhacking required to maneuver through Maine's dense woodlands. The vintage ones run big and are great for layering, and the newer ones feel a bit more suited to urban, suburban life with lighter fabric and a more trim fit. If you prioritize durability or just like the heritage look, these are a great value. Next, the Bird's Eye sweater. Introduced in 1965 and inspired by Norwegian fishing sweaters, the Bird's Eye for me is just quintessential LL Bean. Now, up until somewhat recently, these were made in Norway and praised for their warmth and durability. But production shifted elsewhere, and the newest iteration feels pretty pedestrian. Not like the rugged seafaring versions of the past, so if you want the real deal, look for those made in Norway. But be careful, because I noticed a lot of shrunken Bird's Eye sweaters on eBay. And if you don't know how to spot a shrunken sweater, check out my video covering the topic. Next, the Flying Tiger leather bomber jacket. Modeled after jackets used by pilots in World War II, the Flying Tiger was arguably LL Bean's edgiest offering and probably still holds that crown. According to this ad here, they had 3 different models: original, weathered, and a real beauty lined with shirtling, and they have developed a bit of a cult following. Some of these can sell for over $200, but with a little patience, a nice one can be had for around $100. Great value. Next, flannel lined jeans. So whereas the Flying Tiger feels like the bad boy side of LL Bean, the flannel lined jeans are just pure fuddy-duddy. I remember being gifted a pair as a child and at first finding the soft lining fun and amusing, then shortly later just unbearably stuffy. These pants serve a purpose, but for everyday wear they don't work for me. But hey, if you run cold or are just trying to keep the heating bill low, you're in luck because there are a lot of these floating around. And some other honorable mentions are the anorak jacket, the nylon fleece line jacket, these playful Nordic pattern snap tee fleeces, and of course the canvas tote that has carried more farmers market goods than any other vessel known to man. And to cap things off, here are just some practical shopping tips. First, LL Bean is great for bigger people. Their clothes will generally have a more full, relaxed cut compared to, say, Patagonia. Plus, they have for many years and still do offer tall sizes. So if you struggle to find clothes that fit because you have super broad shoulders or a thick trunk or are 6'6", LL Bean should work for you. Second tip, when buying newer LL Bean, both be patient and only get stuff in excellent condition or above. So if you're looking to buy newer LL Bean, don't settle for something with, say, more than light signs of wear, unless it's something pretty robust like a field coat or a canvas shirt. For one, their newer stuff isn't that expensive to begin with. And unlike their older stuff, which can really break in beautifully, their newer stuff I just don't think is built well enough to really be worn and develop that nice patina. It's just more disposable. Plus, there are thousands of pieces posted every day, and the majority of what's out there on the pre-owned markets right now was made within the last 10 years, so the selection is really huge. Ultimately, if you're buying newer LL Bean, make sure you are truly confident in the purchase. Because if you're not, you should just keep digging or be patient. Just don't force it. And third tip, enjoy the vintage offerings while they last. LL Bean vintage stuff is great, and it's still very affordable and is somewhat plentiful. So enjoy it while it lasts, because who knows if there's going to be, or who knows what the pre-owned marketplace will look like in 10 years. Now, I do think vintage stuff will continue to be pushed onto the pre-owned marketplace for the foreseeable future, as boomers kind of, empty out their closets and age out. Age out, it's a nice euphemism for pass away. But nonetheless, I don't think supply is gonna keep up with demand, basically. So if you find something that's timeless and will continue to age well and it really strikes your fancy, don't be afraid to be a bit more aggressive on it. Basically the opposite advice of when it comes to buying newer LL Bean. And that'll do it for today. I hope you found this helpful. I've had a lot of fun going through all these different LL Bean listings and looking at all the old ads, and it really brought me back to my childhood. It does make me a little sad that LL Bean doesn't quite have the prestige that it once did, but it's the way it goes. Nothing remains a constant in this world. And with that, thanks for tuning in to Coyote Sharp.